Hello and welcome to a special presentation of In the Money Media. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel. Very excited for the show. We're going to be taking a little bit of a deeper look at the Race Lens product, and we're going to be doing that with Race Lens power user and In the Money Media regular, Matt Vagvolgi. Matt, first and foremost, how are things?
Things are good. It's a crazy part of the year for what I do in my real life. So we've got a few more days to close the year out. It looks good, but it's certainly exhausting. But my favorite time of the year, holidays, a gazillion people coming over, and have a lot of good times. So so good times coming. But I would say I'm pretty exhausted at this point.
Do you have to go all the way through, or do you reach a stopping point where you can then focus on, Vagvolgi Family Christmas?
I would say once I get to around, I don't know, let's call it 4 or 5 o'clock today, I can shut it down, go through the weekend, and then Tuesday all hell will break loose for a few days, and then I make the joke when I present to the board. It's I get one day to enjoy a good year, and that's New Year's Day, because last year's over and the next year hasn't started yet. So that's kind of my neutral zone there. But as soon as that day is over, it's all about 2024. So it never seems to stop, Pete.
It's amazing, and these skills that serve you well in finance in the world that you're in certainly serve you well as a horse player. Want to tell folks that whether you're looking for a last minute gift for that special degenerate in your life, or potentially you are somebody who got some Christmas money and is wondering how to use it, we still have this promo going on. A lot of people have taken advantage of it, but they're going to keep it around for a little bit longer. You don't want to sleep on it too long. $300 you get to save on an annual Race Lens subscription. Plus, you get a year of In the Money Plus. To learn more about this fantastic limited time offer, you're going to want to go to inthemoneypodcast.com/racelens. And one of the things we wanted to do on this little series of shows we're going to be doing throughout the winter is to demonstrate the kinds of research and the kinds of questions you can tackle with Race Lens. We may do a deeper dive into some of these categories in a future show. But on this show, we just wanted to show you the types of conclusions you can come to testing conventional horse racing wisdom. Matt, you want me to just pop the first slide up, or do you want to set it up a little bit more?
Yeah, I think the idea is to show. I think this is an interesting concept, something I've wanted to do for a while, of looking at it from just a different viewpoint, right? Of not necessarily handicapping a card or looking at today's races. It's more of kind of taking a step back and looking at it from a wider lens, so to speak, pun intended. And it's kind of how I got into this, right? So like, I'm not an employee of Equibase, right? I'm a user of this platform. I have been since it started, and how it's helped me, I think, look at races differently, help me focus my qualitative side of handicapping using the quantitative side. And I mentioned this before. Listen, I don't have a background in programming, right? I'm a hack programmer at best. I'm getting better at it throughout the years, through Excel and Python and things like that. But you don't have to have the modeling experience to do that. It's one of the things we'll demonstrate. So not necessarily just a product demonstration, but think about some different things, and we'll show some different ideas. We'll walk through a couple today of like things you hear at the track, some things you may have a preconceived notion on, or you've just kind of expected as the truth. I started to run those through different angles and different, looking at the number side, and some can, some come to that conclusion, and some don't, and then you kind of go on from there. So, and again, I think this is starting from the top, so to speak. Again, a lot of questions or inquiries, Pete, I'm sure you're the same, of when you look at, first time starters, right? How efficient is the board, and how efficient is the market? And that's kind of the idea of what, what we're showing here.
First time starters are really, really interesting because understandably, a lot of people are hesitant to bet first time starters because you don't have any actual racing paper to go on. The market is so much determined by speed figures. Here's a horse with no speed figures. So you wonder in that case, is it fully comfortable to end up backing a favorite? On the other hand, these are the races where you would think that having some sort of inside knowledge or specialist knowledge would pay the biggest dividend, therefore making the favorite Maybe they're a little bit more appealing in that sense. And with all these unknowns, hey, maybe there really is such a thing as smart money in maiden races. So you took the last year and you ran through Race Lens, the 777 starts, and we see here, I think this is pretty interesting, a 29% win rate. So that's decidedly lower percentage than your average favorite wins. Now, maybe that could be changed a little bit by the fact that maiden races are going to tend in general to have bigger, fuller fields. And then an ROI of minus 22%, which actually in a 20% takeout environment isn't terrible. What do you see when you look at these numbers? What do you make of this stat that you pulled?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where, again, you're going to run into a lot of stats like this, or when you run research, that's not going to give you a clear vision one way or the other, right? I mean, I think it tells you to an extent with that sample size that, yeah, these horses do win, but they don't win as often as like you mentioned, a traditional favorite. The ROI isn't necessarily terrible, which means, the from the morning line, the board may react differently and cause some more equity value there, or the public just not sure where to go and kind of evens out that board. What I think it says, I think there's some value in what the board is showing you, right, in terms of money movement. But I think just as a clear standard for you to say, you know what, I'm just going to look to see where the public's going. That's the horse I'm going to bet. I think it should cause you a little bit of pause. So this is a very basic high view of this, but this is where I like to start. Give me an idea of how efficient the market is, and then, like Pete, like you mentioned, as we kind of go along through this show, I'm going to dive in very detailed in a lot of these different things, looking at different connections, looking at different scenarios. But from an overall standpoint, again, I think the market does show a little bit of value, not as much as you think, but the ROI isn't necessarily terrible as well.
Can you do something like compare morning line favorites to actual betting favorites? Like look at only morning line favorites that weren't the the public betting choice and vice versa. I wonder if there might be any signal in parsing it at that level, or is that too down the rabbit hole even for a program like Racelands?
No, I think that's a good example. Like that's something that as we go along, I can show, okay, morning line, first time starter, morning line favorites versus what were the closing odds, right? So then you can take a look to see, did that horse go off as the favorite? Did that horse drift? And what that allows you to do is you start to see trends with connections too, right? You start to get an idea of where the public maybe automatically gravitates towards, no matter what, right? And you start to see, morning line. I like to run this for like a Chad Brown first time starter. Morning line 2-1 or greater, closing odds 2-1 or less, right? And just to see kind of where that fits, and you see you get an interesting idea of the public does, in my opinion, kind of blindly gravitate towards that. This is the whole point is creating context to support your qualitative handicapping, right? So not blindly look at the numbers, but for me, that may say, hey, there might be equity in looking elsewhere in a race like that if you see kind of that blind following. So this is how you start kind of from a broad view. And then, as you said, as we go along, I like to kind of dive and dig a little bit deeper into it.
One thing that also occurs to me that I'd love to parse with this stat in particular, all morning line favorites are not created equal in the sense of not all morning line makers are created equal. I wonder if separating it out by circuit, particularly in New York with David Aragona and the work that he does looking at replays and all this extra stuff he's putting into it. Not that other morning line makers don't do that, but David's just a particularly good example of it. I wonder if they might do a little bit, if they do a little bit better in New York as a result of that, or how that plays out. That might be another fun future area for exploration.
Yeah, you hit it. You hit one right on the head that I do for every major circuit I play. I will run it. I'll actually take the time to run that for every type of scenario. So not just 2-year-old races. I'll run maiden claiming, maiden special weight, stakes races, graded stakes, grade 1s, grade 2s, grade 3s. You can go as detailed as you possibly want to and see how well the morning line maker is. And I'll give a little bit of a spoiler, but David Aragona is really good. So I think you all have come to that conclusion as well. And again, this isn't to disparage other morning line makers, but what you want to see is like, how good is that line, right? I mean, how well is that line holding up, especially in races where you might be a little confused confused and not necessarily, have a strong opinion, you may want to kind of give some credence to that morning line. So a lot of different ways that you can go, but it also too, and again, not to disparage, but there are places where it's pretty obvious you should dismiss the morning line. I'm not really holding much value. So yeah, you can go through that in detail. I do that personally for every major track that I play.
Should we move on to our next slide here, or anything else on this one?
Yeah. So again, just giving you kind of that broad view of first time starters. You have that general question, how well did they do off of that morning line favorite? But let's take it, like, if we go into the next side of it, looking at it from a little bit on a kind of somewhat of a deeper dive, taking the next layer off. I get this question a lot of first time starters, but they draw the rail. Everybody tells me that is just the death nail to a first time starter. And listen, you got a large sample size here, right? But again, when you're looking at this from a broad base of the horse population, that's a big sample, but you're also seeing that ROI come down. I'm sorry, you're seeing the win percentage come down. The ROI again isn't necessarily terrible because of that, right? I think as you're looking at this, you're saying to yourself, this is what I love about being able to do this type of research is, yes, the win percentage is coming down, but the betting public is also taking that at face value and getting off probably a lot of these horses as well, right? That's where I think the ROI is a bit better, because those horses are inflated because of the fact that they draw the rail. So
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. The narrative interferes. 11% win. I wish we knew what the average field size was in that sample. I guess there's no way to know that off the top of the head, but I mean, I'm going to guess that, just it's American racing, right? And if you're looking at 1790, these are not all full fields. So, if it's a 10 horse field, the rail is winning its fair share of the point at 10%. So it's actually pretty good. I'm good. I'm going to go ahead and say this really makes me want to say that's a bit of old racetrack wisdom that really just doesn't hold up. Now, there's other ways you could test it. Maybe if you looked at it, my theory would be the number would go down looking at races where they break out of a chute. You'll often see a firster get a little bit confused or break a little bit the wrong way when there isn't that running rail established the whole way. Now, that would be very hard. I guess you'd have to go through and do that manually. But, I think speed wins so many of these races. Another thing you could do, of course, is separate it out into sprints and routes. There's so many other things you could do here to try to get a little bit more signal. But yeah, I think we can safely say that reflexively dismissing the first time starter from the rail is not a good idea looking at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, from the general statistic, or even kind of getting off the morning line favorite, just looking at a first time starter drawing the rail. I think you can pull out some narrative there. And again, this is the process of trying to generate, the most disputed word in gambling, which is value, right? So many people have a different opinion as to what that means. To me, this is how I use statistics to try to start to generate that value, right? Because embedded in that number is what the public thinks, right? And with a larger sample like this, you get a better idea, and you can see that when you look at it from a morning line favorite standpoint. Still a good win percentage, right? And the ROI dropping. But again, there can have some narratives inside of that too, where you mentioned a few things that we will do is you can do it by field size. So you can actually go in and change that field size and see if that number changes. You can do it I like to do this at Saratoga with first time starters routing on the turf. There's some years where I have just blindly dismissed first time starters in those races. Like, experience on both of those turf courses to me in turf routes just shows, again, it can change, but there's times where it's shown that experience is incredibly important. So again, I think this is more of, how do I take a really broad stat and then start to drill down and look at it differently, or get a sense for how the market treats these types of general assumptions?
It is fascinating, this morning line favorite one, because this actually, it's so funny how it goes with and violates conventional wisdom at the same time. To me, as a favorite, 9%, 19%, you're supposed to be 33%. So that's significantly lower than it quote unquote should be. And obviously the ROI is just terrible, which to me suggests maybe just a general overbetting of favorites in maiden special races as well. So as much as I don't want to be put off your average first time starter breaking from the rail. These stats are bad enough that they would make me think twice, unless it was a horse that I was super confident was going to be able to break away from their running. Maybe a horse with really good workouts, I wouldn't mind, but sort of like your average favorite breaking from the rail, this stat would make me, those numbers to me are bad enough that they would make me think twice about betting a horse like that, unless
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I showed it in context, right? What you're seeing kind of in statistic form is the tug and pull of the brain of the average bettor, right? Of the public
yeah.
bettor, right? Of that thought of, well, drawing the rail is not a good thing, but maybe it's a race full of first time starters, and the board seems to be going in that direction of this horse on the rail. Why not, right? The public's usually smarter than I am, so let's go there. And that's where you start to get this really bad win percentage, bad ROI relative to what you'd expect. So again, today, that's kind of the idea of today. Just try to get an idea from a very broad sense of how you get the wheels turning a little bit, and then you're able to dig a little bit deeper, and maybe find scenarios that are really clear as to what you want to take a look at. But no, I agree with you, Pete. Again, it's an interesting way to look at statistics that give a really good sense of what the market thinks.
It is funny that a stat that's so like in old horse player wisdom anyway, that you'd think people would be shying away from, based on conventional wisdom, could have an ROI that bad. That's the other part of it that like tugs at my brain.
Yeah, but again, I think what you're seeing here is just the betting public wanting the easy button. Well, obviously somebody knows more than I do, right? So I'm going to lean more on this horse that's getting bet, right? Even though this horse is drawn the rail, you know what, was the morning line favorite, everyone's betting it, I'm going to jump on board. To me, I see that a lot, like especially in Hong Kong, you see this all the time, right? If there is a horse that's taking steam, you just see it pile on and pile on and pile on. And you see it over here too. Again, you can drill down even further to connections. I think that's where these stats get very interesting as well, of looking at high profile connections. Even ownership groups, right? That's something else that I'm going to do. I find is very fascinating, especially at Saratoga, where you start to handicap intent of ownership groups that are dropping to win because they love to be in the winner's circle. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at this, but the best way for me is to show basic stats like this, where then you can drill a little bit deeper and start to kind of focus in a little bit more.
We've got a couple more slides for the folks if you want to lead us through. I just enjoying having these sort of free flowing conversations based on this stuff.
Yeah. So the next one, this is probably the biggest question that you get kind of overall is, the biggest drop in racing, right? Maiden special weight to maiden claiming, right? So obviously the horse has to be superior, or is this running against, an 8th grader running against, my 6-year-old, right? It's just that much of a difference. And again, it's somewhat of a ho-hum kind of number, right? To me, when I look at this, I'm not necessarily, yes, I'm going to consider that. But from a very basic standpoint of looking at that as a horse you want to kind of draw yourself into just because of the fact they're coming in from maiden special weight to maiden claiming, I think is very different.
It looks to me, my gut looking at that number, Matt, is it's just full, like it is 15% win, probably not bad. Hard to know what percentage they were supposed to win at based on the prices in that giant sample. But what I see when I look at these numbers is it's just fully priced in, right? Minus 25, just, everybody knows it's a thing. You would never want to make a decision based on that alone, I wouldn't think. You'd want to be looking at other factors. I mean, the first way I'd want to parse that is, and the way that I always learned that stat is a maiden special weight that showed speed at that level, then dropping. I wonder if that wouldn't significantly improve those numbers. I mean, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe that's so known that it would also be completely priced in. But those are the sort of fun games you can play with race lines.
Yeah, let's take a look at it, right? Let's take a look kind of that basic idea of, all right, what if, we're looking at it from more of a speed perspective, a horse that's dropping against significantly less, but also has shown speed. So you can actually run that. So that's kind of what I did here of maiden special weight to maiden claiming has the best equibase speed figure last race out. So we're looking at it from a standpoint of who has run the best, has shown the best speed in that last race, making this massive drop. Does that change anything? And it does, right?
Massive.
Massive change here from 32% wins. and you're basically, I'd call that flat on the ROI side, which to me is
Yeah.
amazing because these horses are going to get pounded in the pool.
Yeah, they're favorites. If you have the best Equibase speed figure last out, you're probably the favorite, what, 80% of the time?
Yeah, yeah. So again, that ROI to me just kind of falls into that just, a very good clip of 32% win. So again, it seems obvious, but this is something to me that I look at, right? I want to at least be made aware, right? And that's one of the things that we can go through as we move along on the Racelands platform, is to show you, how that works, right? I can filter the entire day of every track and say, you know what, I just want you to show me, does this maiden special weight to maiden claiming statistic with who has the best last out Equibase speed figure, I can filter that and just look to see if any of those angles pop up in any track, right? Because
That's
then that
great.
might be a force to focus in on and look out to maybe some multi-race exotics. The price might not be the best, but I may on my qualitative side come to the conclusion that this horse is going to be extremely difficult to beat, and I can generate some value around it, right? So kind of the process of walking through of how you make decisions in betting could start with something kind of a cornerstone like this.
I think it's great. I mean, just to show you the races that you want to look at. And right, I mean, 6% ROI minus 6% ROI, that doesn't mean you're going to be betting it blindly, but think of it from the qualitative side. Instead of you put an average race in your face and you're lucky if your expected ROI, it's probably even lower than this, but it's at least about minus 20, right? Depending on what pool you're in. But let's just call it an average of minus 20%. In fact, because of some efficiencies in the market and other things, it's probably for the average player, it actually surely is lower than that. But you as a skilled horse player, maybe a random race is a 20% takeout. Well, now we're giving you a subset of races that's 6%. So then with your qualitative handicapping, instead of having to be 20% better than the market, you only got to be 7% better than the market. Which pond do you want to fish in? The one with all the, the bony little guppies, or the one where you might catch a nice bluefish to throw on your smoker and make for the feast of the seven fishes. It's an easy call to try to fish in the pond with the minus 6%, if you catch my meaning.
Yeah, and again, just broad, not saying for this angle in particular, but something that draws you to a horse that, yes, will be a short price, but you really feel is absolutely dominant in the field. Listen, I hit a pick six for 100 grand at Belmont, and it had a 4-5 shot at it.
Yeah, of
Right.
course.
So again, if you can find that type of value around that kind of break, what I say is focus in, react out, focus in on a horse and say, okay, I don't want to bet this through the win pool. I'm not going to, there's not much equity there. Exactas, I don't think are there. Let's kind of broaden out doubles, pick threes, pick fives, whatever the case may be. You may think of that horse differently. Right. So it's a way to kind of, you take this number in, you can look at this differently to say, you know what, I would never want to bet this horse on a flat bet, but maybe this is something that comes into the fold when I'm looking at this more broadly. And I took a look at this as well, kind of to the next step. If you look at kind of the main special weight, the main claim, you can do a projection of pace, right? So not only the best Equibase speed figure last out, but looking at it from a pace perspective, do you expect this horse to be on the lead at first call, and how do those horses do? Now you're seeing a different number there. I want to point this out, that when you will have horses that will have the same figures that will pop up as the same. So you'll see different populations, so to speak, right? So if you have the same pace, early pace figure, you're both going to show up as projected on the lead at first call,
Okay.
right? So just keep that in mind there.
You have
Doesn't
some extra
happen.
losers in there, and there's some necessary extra losers.
Yeah, again, it goes back to the premise of the quantitative and qualitative side of handicapping, and that's it, right? Of looking to see exactly in that race, what is this statistic telling me, and does it hold water? But I just wanted to point that out. It's the differences in the numbers there. But the point of it is, you can drill down a little bit more and find out, this class drop, yes, is kind of the general knowledge at the track. Off the cuff in a very general sense, may not be a whole lot there, but you start to drill down when it comes to a speed figure standpoint, it starts to come a little bit more to the surface, so to speak.
I would have thought that this would have been a little bit better of a stat with the projected on lead first call, honestly. I mean, it's not, minus 21. It's not horrendous. It's basically what's expected. 25% win is certainly very, very solid, but I don't really know what to make of the second number. It's not one I'd be looking to build anything too major around in terms of an angle like we were talking about before.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a way where you can start to dive in a little bit deeper and look at more of maybe the intent of other horses. There might be some other cheap speed in the race that the only shot they have is to go, right? They are projected to be on the lead, but maybe they're at an uncomfortable lead, right? They want to get the lead, but they're kind of forced along more uncomfortably. So this is where you can combine them, right? You can say, listen, let me look at the main special weight to main claiming. It's got the best equibase speed figure last out, but also within the context of the race, projects this horse to be on the lead at first call, right?
Gotcha.
So you can take this and kind of build and kind of package that all together. So, but again, the idea of showing this is how to get those wheels to turn, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole idea of this. Why I love it. I've literally been at the rail at Saratoga and have pulled out my phone and run an angle on my phone through Race Lens because I'm seeing something and I'm just curious, right? And you know, am I on something or am I on to something, right? That's kind of the idea of when something hits your eyes, you want to see if it actually holds water when you look at it from a statistical standpoint.
We just have a few minutes left, Matt. If there's other slides we can rush through, we can. But I do want to show the product screen itself if we have a minute to do that. Where do you think we should go next? You want
Yeah,
pull up
you know
the
what I can do is I just want to give in the last couple of minutes give an idea of just like where to find stuff. Like we're gonna do this in much more detail as we go along, but at least for today, like we showed maidens, we showed you know main special weight to main claiming, but we showed first time starters, right? So that's something very basic I want to show you. If you're curious about first time starters and you want to try to build through that a little bit more and see exactly you know what that looks like. You know what I'll do is I'll show you where to find that, right? So that's the other part is too is not just you know telling you these things, but you know teaching you how to fish, so to speak, when you
Yep.
look at of what we have here. So what I'll do is I'll get up the main page here on Race Lens, and once you pop that up, I'll walk you through like where to find this, right? So again, let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger here.
Looks
There we
good.
go. That should work. So what you want to do is when you go under manage angles on the top here, right? And just a reference to what I mentioned before about filtering angles, this would be the option to select here. When you click that, right, you can basically zero all the angles out and then find the ones that you want, right? And then select that and look to see like which tracks have that because you'll see on the left hand side all of the angles that come up under these different tracks for today, right? Once you start to go through and filter, they start to get less and less. You become a little bit more focused to that. But under the manage angles tab, what we'll do is I'll show you just kind of the general idea. These are all my angles here. But if you want to create a new angle right here on the right hand side, right, this brings you to the main angle page, right? So this is where you can build anything you want. To be honest with you, that's what has drawn me to this since the days that came out. I became interested in, and I get it. I started from the very beginning when I started. I looked at this and I'm like, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start. Right. So that's kind of the other idea too, is to give you some idea of how to chip away, maybe use some examples to start to dig in. But if you want to look at first time starters, I'm going to click on case. And then right here, you'll see this tab called days between starts. This is where you can get into detail, right? So you can
Yep.
select that first time starter right there. Could be second career start, third career start, first off a layoff, second off a lay, like all these different things you can drill even deeper. But let's say I just want to look at first time starters. All I do is hit add to criteria and boom, it shows up, right? So now it becomes part of your analysis that you want to do. And if I want to show it from a horse perspective, right? So I go under profile, I select horse. Then you can look at all these different things, right? The track, the surface, distance. Let's go over what we showed you today. Right? I want to take a look at
Oh,
class. It does all these prefabs for you. You can go into detail and actually do it exactly to a particular purse or whatever. But, you know, let's say I wanted to do it, first time starter, you know, if I want to go from all the different classes we show, the main special weight to main claiming, right? All these different things that we can do here, right?
nice and populated in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of these are all pre-populated. If you wanted to go surface, if you want to show just dirt, synthetic, if you want to go to a specific track, right? So if it's first time on turf, dirt to turf, like the point is you can do there's so much in here that you can do. The key is to kind of give you an idea as to where to find these basic functions. But once you select it, it populates here under this title, you name it, whatever you want, right? Once you do that, you click save. And then it starts the process of what we call a back test, where we're running these figures. And usually it will give you up to a 5-year sample. So it'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1. Then it'll go to 6 months. It'll go to the last 2 weeks, right? So that'll give you that kind of span. When it's an exceptionally large stat, like first-time starters, it's just going to go up to the year because there's so much in terms of what actually hits. So again, just giving you a very basic idea. As we go along, some of these more detailed angles that I'm going to run, I'm actually going to walk through them step by step to show you how to do it. And I don't know, Pete, maybe on the In the Money Plus side, we can do this as a print option to send this out to everybody as a reference. But the key is to kind of get an idea of where everything is, and then let your wheels start to turn and start to get that going from there.
Well, that's very well put. And we'll mention, if it sounds intimidating, don't let it sound intimidating, because if you sign up for this subscription, and we'll pop up the deal that we have there in the window again while we do it, you can get one-on-one tutorials. And if you are a plus, you do this and you're a plus person, schedules will have to be coordinated very carefully, but you might have the opportunity to do a session with even with Matt, if he can find the time to do that in the new year. And there's other great members of the team as well over there on the Equibase side. You will not be just given this and told to fend for yourselves. You have the opportunity to ask questions and be able to learn a lot more. Remember, the key URL, inthemoneypodcast.com/racelands. Matt, this was good. I think we sort of scratched the surface of what we want to do in this series. We'll be back with more episodes in the new year, but really wanted to just get this out there in the world and just remind people one more time about this special offer. It's not going to last forever. It's going to be going away soon. So you definitely want to get busy and get involved in themoneypodcast.com/racelands. Any closing thoughts from you, Matt?
No, I'm just looking forward to doing this. Something I've wanted to do for a while, and kind of get an idea of how I look at different things. And again, this is not a handicapping, tell you who to bet products. I think that's probably why I like it the most, is because you're creating almost kind of proprietary information, right? Depending on how you look at it. It could be very general, but you get specific, you're starting to look at things very differently. And again, when it comes to an edge, is what information that people may not be looking at that you can create. So again, this is why I like it. And I'm looking forward to kind of walking through some different ideas. And also for you, let me throw this out there as well. Like, let's start getting ideas, like start crowdsourcing this. If you have anything you're thinking about, in terms of what you hear at the track, or, Dad tell me to always bet this or do this or whatever, send those along to the In the Money media feed on Twitter or directly to the website.
Pop it in the comments. You're watching this on YouTube in all likelihood. Pop it up in the comments on YouTube. Let us know. But what I want to know, Matt, is can we run an angle on if it's actually a good idea to bet the gray on the rainy day?
Unfortunately, I don't think we can do that. I don't think that's possible. Or run it by names. I would love to do that. Like, how many horses named Steve wins? Or like, what's the ROI on
if there's a human name? If there's a human name that's in the most 100 popular human names, what happens to the ROI? I'm guessing it goes with.
If you gave me a more detailed CSV file, Pete, I think if I lock myself in a room for a day, that's the kind of stuff that I can come up with. But I don't think we can do that on Racelands here.
I wouldn't do that to you. But anyway, Matt, this was great fun. I want to thank you. I want to thank Rhonda and our friends over at Equibase/Racelands. It's been a great partnership. We've had a lot of people sign up for this terrific promotion already, and we have room for a few more. So why don't you be one of them out there, viewer, and come and join us. And again, feel free to take advantage of a tutorial from the Racelands team and ask questions and get to use this. It's a very potent tool that, gosh, I want to incorporate more into my own handicapping, just because these are the fun rabbit holes to go down. For Matt Vagvolgi, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.